The palace of Xylaris stood tall, its spires cutting through the pink sky like crystal daggers. Built from shining metal and glowing stones, it was a testament to the alien queen's power. Queen Lyra, young but wise, walked through the main hall, her robes shimmering like liquid silver. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration. Envoys from neighboring worlds were visiting, and the palace buzzed with life. Guards lined the corridors, their sleek armor reflecting the light, and servants scurried about, ensuring everything was perfect. Yet, beneath the surface, tension hummed like electricity in the air. Lyra's advisors whispered about political unrest. Rumors of a rebellion had reached her ears. But she did not expect it to happen here. Inside her own palace, she had always trusted her guards. They were elite, handpicked, loyal to the crown, trained from birth to defend her life with their own. And yet, a creeping unease clung to her chest, as though some invisible storm was approaching. At the palace gates, a strange figure arrived. Unlike the tall, multi-limbed aliens who usually visited, this newcomer was human, Ethan. His appearance drew attention immediately. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, considered fragile and unpredictable by alien standards. Ethan's lean frame and simple clothes contrasted sharply with the elaborate uniforms of the palace guards. But there was something in his eyes, calm, sharp, alert, that made the observing guards uneasy. Ethan had been hired as an independent security consultant, an outsider brought in to study the palace's defenses. He had no loyalty to the guards or the politicians, only to the principles of strategy and survival. Lyra had agreed to his presence reluctantly, skeptical that a human could understand alien politics, let alone palace security. Yet, she did not deny a sense of curiosity. There was a quiet intelligence about him, a patience that suggested he watched and learned before acting. The palace was alive with music and laughter. But the sense of unease only grew. Ethan moved silently through the crowd, scanning the halls, noting exits, secret corridors, and vantage points. He observed the guards' routines, their patterns, and the subtle gaps in their attention. Something about the way the guards moved, it was almost mechanical, precise, but blind to the bigger picture. He made mental notes, as he always did, storing every detail in case it became important. Then, without warning, the day's festivities shattered. A deep, booming alarm echoed through the palace halls. The lights flickered, and the music stopped abruptly. Outside, the sky darkened as enemy ships descended, black silhouettes against the glowing clouds. A roar of panic swept through the palace. "Attack!" shouted one of the guards, drawing his energy blade. But the words were hollow. They did not move to defend the queen. Instead, confusion spread, and fear took hold. Guards who had sworn loyalty to Lyra abandoned their posts. Some fled, others hid, leaving wide corridors and exposed walls. The queen's heart sank as she realized that the palace, the fortress of her rule, was crumbling not because of the enemy, but because of those she trusted most. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. He saw the chaos and assessed the situation in seconds. The queen's position was vulnerable, and the palace was no longer secure. He moved toward Lyra without hesitation. "Your Highness," he called, his voice firm but calm. "Follow me. Stay close, and do exactly as I say." Lyra blinked, taken aback. The guards were gone. There was no one else to protect her. And yet this human, whom she barely knew, was stepping forward to take command. Her instinct was to protest, but the fear in the room made her realize the truth: she had no other choice. She nodded silently. Ethan guided her through a hidden passage he had noticed earlier, one that led beneath the palace. The walls were cool and smooth, glowing faintly with embedded lights. The passage twisted and turned, far from the grand halls and the terrified crowd. Lyra followed closely, her mind racing with disbelief and awe. How do you know this place?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I observe," Ethan replied simply. "And I anticipate. You cannot rely on those who panic. Only those who think clearly can survive this. Lyra's heart pounded, but she felt a strange sense of relief. In this human, she saw something different from the guards. A clarity of thought, a willingness to act, and courage that was not bound by hierarchy or fear. The enemy forces were inside the palace now. Shouts and explosions echoed from above. Lyra's mind reeled with questions. Why had the guards abandoned her? Was there a traitor among them? Could she trust anyone at all? Ethan did not answer these questions. He simply led her through the maze of corridors, moving swiftly and silently, avoiding patrols with remarkable skill. At one point, a group of enemy soldiers appeared ahead, blocking their path. Lyra froze, but Ethan acted without hesitation. He grabbed a discarded energy baton from a fallen guard and charged. The enemy, taken by surprise by his audacity, faltered. Using precise, non-lethal strikes, Ethan disabled them, leaving them unconscious but alive. He turned to Lyra, offering her a hand. "Keep moving," he said. She took it, feeling the firmness of his grip. There was strength in his actions, but also a respect for life, a principle that seemed alien to the invaders. Together, they continued deeper into the palace's hidden passages. Finally, they reached a secure chamber, one that served as an emergency sanctuary. The room was small, with reinforced walls and a single communication terminal. Lyra sank to the floor, exhausted, and Ethan stood by the door, alert. "You are safe here, for now," Ethan said. "But we cannot stay. They will search every corridor eventually. We need a plan." Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide. I cannot believe the guards left me. I trusted them with my life. They failed," Ethan said plainly. "But fear and loyalty are not the same. Humans, and some others, can act where loyalty falters. That is why you still live. And thank you for watching. Our main more not content." Lyra studied him carefully. There was a cold truth in his words, but also hope. She realized that, despite the panic, she had found someone who would not abandon her. Someone who would fight, not because of duty, but because it was the right thing to do. Outside, the sounds of battle raged on. Explosions shook the palace walls, and the screams of soldiers and invaders alike filled the air. Yet within the sanctuary, a strange calm settled. Lyra and Ethan were alone, but together, and that made all the difference. Ethan moved to the communication terminal and began sending encrypted messages to allies, coordinating what few loyal forces remained. Lyra watched, fascinated by his methodical approach. In humans, she saw a different kind of courage, not born from tradition or strength, but from clarity, intelligence, and an unwavering willingness to act even when the odds seemed impossible. Hours passed. The palace above them continued to burn and fall, yet the sanctuary remained intact. Lyra finally spoke, her voice steady now. "Ethan, why do you risk yourself for me? You are not one of my people, not one of my guards. Why stay?" Ethan paused, looking at her with steady eyes. "Because you deserve protection. Because someone must stand when others flee. Because courage is not about species, it is about choices." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a shift within her. She realized that true strength was not just in numbers, weapons, or status. It was in the willingness to stand firm when everything else crumbles. She had seen countless guards, trained from birth, fail. And yet, a single human, whom she barely knew, had become her shield. Outside, the battle raged, and the palace was being overrun. But within this small, hidden room, hope flickered. Lyra and Ethan prepared themselves for the next step, knowing they could not hide forever. They would have to move, to fight, and perhaps to change the course of the war. And in that moment, Lyra understood something she had never realized. Sometimes, heroes came from the most unexpected places, and this human, this outsider, was her hero. The palace above burned like a dying star. Smoke curled through the shattered windows, and the sounds of battle echoed through the halls. Queen Lyra and Ethan remained in the hidden sanctuary, their breathing slow but tense. Ethan examined the weak points in the chamber's walls and the paths leading out. The enemy would soon search every corridor, leaving them no time to waste. "We cannot stay here," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "They will find us. We need to leave before it's too late." Lyra nodded. She trusted him. Somehow, in the chaos of betrayal and fire, she trusted this human more than her own guards. She adjusted her silver robe, steadying herself, and followed him as he checked the hidden exits. Ethan's movements were precise, deliberate. Every step was calculated to avoid detection. He led her through a narrow tunnel that spiraled downward. The air was cooler here, tinged with the faint scent of the earth and the palace's hidden energy. Lyra's heart pounded with each echoing footstep. For the first time in her life, she was not surrounded by luxury or safety. She was exposed, relying entirely on someone else. And yet, she did not feel fear. She felt a strange sense of hope. "How do you know where to go?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. "I observe patterns," Ethan replied. "And I prepare for what others do not expect. Your palace is full of secrets. I simply use them." Lyra studied him. The human seemed so ordinary. Yet in him, she saw a mind that was extraordinary. He did not panic. He did not hesitate. He acted with a clarity that she had never seen among her people. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, a distant sound made Lyra stop. Footsteps. Many footsteps. She glanced at Ethan, who raised a hand. They pressed themselves against the cold stone walls. Through a small opening, Lyra could see enemy soldiers moving in patrols. They were heavily armed, their armor black and glinting in the faint light of the tunnels. "They are looking for us," Ethan whispered. "We need to be faster. Follow me exactly." He led her along a series of twisting passages, each narrower than the last. They climbed, crawled, and sometimes had to squeeze through openings barely wider than their shoulders. Lyra's silver robe snagged once on a rough stone, and Ethan quickly helped her free it without making a sound. "Careful," he said. "Every second counts." Finally, they reached a shaft that led to a side entrance far from the main palace grounds. Ethan inspected the lock mechanism, a complex alien design, but he was prepared. With a few swift movements, he bypassed it, and the door opened silently. Outside, the palace gardens had been torn apart by fire and battle, but the night sky stretched over them, vast and quiet. The air was sharp with smoke and the scent of burned plants. Lyra stepped out first, feeling the cool night air on her skin. She looked up at the stars and took a deep breath. For the first time in hours, she could think clearly. Beside her, Ethan checked the surroundings, scanning for threats. "Do you know this terrain?" Lyra asked. "Not well," Ethan admitted. "But I can find a safe route. We will avoid main roads and use natural cover. Keep moving. Stay close." They moved quickly through the gardens, sticking to shadows and abandoned pathways. The distant sounds of fighting reminded them both that time was running out. Lyra noticed that Ethan's calmness never faltered. Even when a small patrol passed near their hiding spot, he remained steady, guiding her without panic. After what felt like hours, they reached the outer perimeter of the palace grounds. Beyond it stretched the wild lands of Xylaris, dense forests of luminous plants, jagged rocks, and hidden rivers. Ethan led Lyra into the trees, their glowing leaves illuminating the path in faint, ethereal light. The alien world was strange to her, yet beautiful. The danger made it even more alive. Lyra stumbled over a root, and Ethan caught her arm instantly. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Only a scratch," she replied, steadying herself. "You must be careful," he warned. "Every injury makes us slower, and slower could mean capture." As they moved deeper into the forest, Lyra asked questions about humanity. "Your people, do they act like this often? Risk everything for someone else?" Ethan glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "Sometimes. Not all humans. But some, yes. Courage, loyalty, and thinking ahead can make a difference." Even against impossible odds, Lyra nodded thoughtfully. She realized how different humans were from her own people. Her guards had abandoned her in fear. Yet this human, weaker in size and strength, had stood firm. She felt admiration and something deeper. Gratitude, yes, but also trust. Hours passed as they moved through the alien forest. Occasionally, they heard the enemy searching behind them, but Ethan always found ways to mislead them: broken branches, disturbed soil, and faint energy traces that led the soldiers in the wrong direction. His ingenuity amazed Lyra. She had never seen such quick thinking. Finally, they reached a small clearing where a natural spring glimmered under the alien stars. Ethan knelt and drank first, motioning for Lyra to do the same. The water was cool and refreshing. For a moment, they allowed themselves to rest, hidden among the glowing plants. "You need to regain your strength," Ethan said. "We cannot go far if you collapse." Lyra looked at him, feeling a sense of safety she had never known. You risked your life for me," she said softly. "Why?" Ethan paused, considering his words. "Because someone had to. And because I believe in doing what is right, even when others fail. You are the queen, yes. But even more, you are a person who deserves protection." Her eyes met his. For the first time, she understood that true courage was not about armor or rank. It was about action. It was about choice. And this human had chosen to act when all others had fled. Night passed slowly as they rested by the spring. Lyra watched Ethan as he slept briefly, still alert, his hand never straying far from the small weapon at his belt. She realized she had come to rely on him not just for her safety, but for guidance, for wisdom, for the courage she herself needed to reclaim. When dawn broke, the alien sky painted in soft pinks and golds, Ethan rose and extended his hand to Lyra. "We move now. The closer we get to the city edge, the safer we are. There is a small resistance group in the hills. They will help us." Lyra took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. She rose, her resolve firm. Today, she would not be a passive observer. She would move, she would fight, and she would reclaim the trust her people had lost. And she would do it with this human by her side, the one who had not abandoned her when the world had. Together, they moved into the alien dawn, leaving the burning palace behind. The road ahead was uncertain, full of dangers and challenges. But Lyra felt a spark of hope. She realized that courage, loyalty, and intelligence could come from unexpected places, and in Ethan, she had found all three. As they disappeared into the forest, the distant sounds of the palace burning faded. But the memory of betrayal stayed with Lyra. She would not forget it, and she would make sure that no one, human or alien, would ever abandon her again. And above all, she knew one truth sometimes. Survival and hope depended on the courage of one human willing to stand alone when all others ran. The forest around them grew denser as Ethan and Queen Lyra pressed forward. The luminous plants cast faint light, creating shadows that shifted like living creatures. Every step carried the tension of being pursued, yet the air was filled with the quiet determination of survival. Lyra's robes brushed against the alien vegetation, but she moved steadily, trusting Ethan's guidance completely. After several hours, they reached the edge of a rocky hill where a small group of aliens had set up a hidden camp. Tents, made of reinforced fibers and natural materials, were scattered between jagged rocks. Smoke from a controlled fire rose gently into the morning sky. At the sight of the queen, the group stirred with excitement and awe. "Your Highness," a tall alien named Ryvak called, bowing deeply. His eyes shone with respect. "We thought you were lost. We are honored to serve you." Lyra inclined her head, gratitude in her gaze. "Thank you," she said. "But it is not just my survival we should consider. The palace has fallen to the enemy, and their forces are stronger than we expected. We need a plan." Ethan observed the group quietly, noting their skills and organization. Unlike the palace guards, these aliens were adaptable, clever, and willing to fight for what was right rather than for duty alone. He studied their numbers, their weapons, and the terrain around them. Then he stepped forward. "We can take the fight to them," Ethan said. "We don't need to face them head-on. We can use their expectations against them." The aliens looked at him with a mix of surprise and skepticism. One of them, a wiry scout named Vela, asked, "You are human. How can you lead us against the largest army in the region?" Ethan's eyes met hers, steady and confident. "Because humans are good at thinking differently. We adapt. We find weaknesses others miss. And we are willing to act when others hesitate." Lyra watched him carefully, admiration growing. His words carried truth. Her palace guards had abandoned her out of fear, yet this human was already thinking several steps ahead. She realized that the key to survival was not only strength, but intelligence, courage, and quick thinking. The next hours were spent preparing for the counterattack. Ethan studied maps of the palace and the surrounding areas, while Lyra shared every secret passage, defensive weak point, and patrol schedule she remembered. The aliens listened closely, asking questions, taking notes. "Your knowledge is invaluable," Ethan said. "Together, we can turn their strengths into weaknesses. They rely on numbers and fear. We rely on strategy and surprise." By nightfall, a plan was forming. They would divide into small teams, using the forest and hills as cover. Each group would strike key enemy positions, disable communications, and cut off reinforcements. Lyra would lead a group to infiltrate the palace again and reclaim critical control points, while Ethan would coordinate the ambushes, using his knowledge of tactics and the terrain. When the first stars appeared, Ethan and Lyra walked along the edge of the camp, reviewing the plan one last time. Lyra spoke softly. "I never imagined a human could think like this. You see the battlefield in ways my people never could." Ethan shrugged. "We rely on brains when we cannot rely on strength. And sometimes, that is enough." A moment of silence passed between them, broken only by the rustle of the forest. Then Ethan turned to her. "When the time comes, you must trust the plan and trust your people, and most importantly, trust yourself." Lyra nodded. She had already learned to trust Ethan, but she now realized she must trust her own judgment as well. Courage was not just following someone else, it was making decisions even when the outcome was uncertain. The night was quiet, but tension thrummed like a heartbeat. Ethan positioned small teams along the enemy's expected path, setting traps and ambush points. The glowing plants and jagged rocks gave them natural cover. He whispered instructions to the alien fighters, emphasizing timing, patience, and precision. When the first patrol approached, Ethan gave a subtle signal. The ambush was swift and clean. Alarmed soldiers were caught in nets and energy restraints. None were killed. Ethan did not believe in unnecessary death, but they were rendered ineffective. The Queen watched with awe as the plan unfolded perfectly. "This is incredible," she whispered. "You turned a hopeless situation into an advantage." Ethan gave a faint smile. "A fight is won by those who see what others miss. Numbers are important, but strategy wins wars." As the night wore on, their ambushes crippled the enemy's outer defenses. Word reached the Queen's group that palace communications had been cut. Panic and confusion spread among the enemy ranks. Lyra realized that their small, clever force was achieving what her entire army could not, because they acted decisively, without hesitation or fear. When the time came to move toward the palace itself, Lyra's group led the way through hidden passages she remembered from her childhood. They avoided the main gates, instead slipping through narrow corridors and abandoned service routes. The sight of the palace from within its walls was shocking fire, and smoke filled the grand halls, and enemy soldiers were scattered, disorganized, and confused. Ethan joined them inside, coordinating the final steps of the plan. His human perspective allowed him to see angles the aliens had missed, weak points that could be exploited. Together, they moved silently, disabling enemy guards and reclaiming key positions. At one point, a group of enemy soldiers cornered them. Lyra froze, but Ethan acted instantly. Using a combination of traps and precise strikes, he neutralized the threat, without anyone being seriously harmed. The queen's confidence grew with every success. She realized that courage and intelligence could overcome fear and strength. By dawn, the palace was partially reclaimed. The enemy had lost control of critical areas, their forces scattered and demoralized. Lyra stood with Ethan in the main hall, looking out over the recovering city. She turned to him, her eyes shining. "You saved me," she said quietly. "Not just from the attack, but from despair. You've shown me what courage really means." Ethan shook his head. "We saved each other. You provided knowledge, leadership, and hope. I only helped you see it differently." For the first time, Lyra felt a deep connection with another being outside her species. She realized that trust and bravery could cross worlds, and that humans small, fragile, and underestimated could achieve incredible things. As the sun rose over Xylaris, its light reflected off the palace spires, revealing both damage and the first signs of recovery. Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The enemy had been wounded, but not defeated, yet she no longer felt powerless. She had a plan, allies, and the human who had never abandoned her. Together, they could change the course of the conflict. Ethan looked at the rising sun, then at Lyra. "The next step is to unite the resistance and take full control. We've shown them we can fight smart. Now we must finish the job." Lyra nodded. Her determination burned brighter than the fire that had once threatened to consume her palace. She realized that leadership was not just about orders, it was about courage, strategy, and the willingness to stand firm when others ran. And she would lead her people back, with Ethan by her side, a symbol of hope and human excellence. In the quiet aftermath of the first counterattack, a new understanding settled between them. They were no longer just queen and protector. They were partners in survival, bound by courage and trust, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. The first light of morning stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. The alien city of Xylaris was slowly waking from the chaos of the previous night, but the enemy was far from defeated. Rumors of resistance and ambushes had spread, and their commanders were furious. They planned a full assault to crush the rebellion once and for all. Queen Lyra and Ethan stood on a hill overlooking the forest where their allies had gathered. Hundreds of loyal aliens, along with their small human-led teams, waited for instructions. The tension was thick, like a storm ready to break. Lyra's silver robe shimmered in the early light, and her eyes were focused and unwavering. She was no longer the frightened queen who had fled her palace. She was a leader prepared to fight for her people. Ethan approached her, scanning the enemy forces below. "They have regrouped," he said. "They know we struck back. They will come with everything they have. But we are ready. We've used the terrain to our advantage, set traps, and trained your people. They won't expect how we fight." Lyra nodded. "Then we fight smart. Not just with strength. We fight as one." As the enemy army advanced, the ground shook with the weight of thousands of soldiers. Their armor glinted in the rising sun, their weapons ready to fire. But Ethan had anticipated this. Hidden among the hills and trees, his teams were positioned strategically. Some would cut off reinforcements, while others set traps along the enemy's path. The first wave of attackers entered the forest, unaware of the ambushes waiting for them. Ethan signaled the first trap. Vines, strengthened with alien fibers, swung from the trees, knocking soldiers off their feet. Rocks hidden above rolled down paths, blocking their advance. The enemy soldiers were confused, disoriented, and frustrated. Lyra watched with awe. The humans and aliens worked seamlessly together, following Ethan's orders with precision. The queen realized that courage alone was not enough. Intelligence and strategy could turn the tide of battle, and Ethan embodied both. The enemy regrouped and tried to charge directly at the queen's forces. Lyra stepped forward, raising her voice to rally her people. "Hold your ground. Protect each other. Protect our home." Her words echoed across the forest, carrying strength and determination. The alien fighters, inspired by her presence, fought with renewed energy. They moved with precision, using the traps and ambushes Ethan had prepared. At one point, a group of enemy soldiers broke through the first line of defense and rushed toward Lyra. She froze for a moment, but Ethan was already there. He intercepted the attackers with swift, calculated movements, using his small size to his advantage. He dodged their strikes, tripped them, and disarmed them without killing. His human agility and quick thinking saved the queen. Lyra realized something important. Courage was contagious. Seeing Ethan fight fearlessly inspired her people to fight harder. They were no longer just defending themselves, they were defending their queen, their home, and their future. The battle raged for hours. Traps, ambushes, and clever maneuvers slowed the enemy. But their numbers were overwhelming. Ethan's mind raced, constantly calculating, adapting, and predicting. He directed teams to move, strike, and retreat at the right moments. The forest became a maze of confusion for the enemy soldiers, while Lyra's forces moved with unity and determination. At one point, Lyra found herself cornered on a small hill. Enemy soldiers surrounded her, their weapons aimed. Panic surged in her chest, but she remembered Ethan's words. Trust yourself and act with clarity. She drew a small energy blade from her belt and stood tall. Ethan noticed her danger and charged forward, using his agility to dodge attacks and create openings. Together, they moved as a team. Ethan distracted the enemy, allowing Lyra to strike with precision. The soldiers stumbled, confused by the unexpected teamwork between human and alien. Move forward, Lyra shouted to her allies. We are stronger than fear. Her voice carried over the battlefield, and her people responded. They pushed the enemy back, reclaiming lost ground. The enemy soldiers began to retreat, unable to keep up with the strategy, courage, and determination of the queen and her allies. By late afternoon, the enemy was in full retreat. Smoke rose from the forest where traps had slowed them, and the battlefield was quiet, except for the victorious cries of Lyra's forces. The queen stood beside Ethan, her chest heaving from the adrenaline, but her eyes bright with pride. You did it, she said softly. We did it. Together. Ethan shook his head. You led them. You inspired them. I only helped guide the plan. The victory belongs to your courage and your people's willingness to fight. Lyra studied him carefully. She realized that true leadership was not just about giving orders, it was about inspiring others, showing courage when fear threatened to take over, and making decisions even when the outcome was uncertain. Ethan had shown her that humans were capable of these things naturally. Even in a world so different from their own, the queen and the human walked through the battlefield, checking on their people. Injured soldiers were helped, traps were removed, and the first steps toward recovery began. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of hope, a belief that they could rebuild what had been lost. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra and Ethan stood atop a hill overlooking the city. The palace, though damaged, was still standing. Fires burned in isolated areas, but the enemy had been repelled. Lyra felt a sense of relief and pride. They had not only survived, they had shown that courage, strategy, and loyalty could overcome even overwhelming odds. You were amazing, Lyra said, turning to Ethan. I have never seen anyone fight like you. Humans, you are truly remarkable. Ethan smiled faintly. We adapt. We act when others hesitate. And sometimes, we inspire those around us to do the same. Lyra nodded. She realized that this human was more than a protector, he was a symbol of hope and strength. He had stood when everyone else had abandoned her. He had turned despair into courage and chaos into strategy. As night fell, the queen addressed her people. She spoke of bravery, unity, and the importance of standing together, and at her side stood Ethan, the human who had never abandoned her, who had fought tirelessly, and who had shown that courage and intelligence could bridge worlds. For the first time since the attack on the palace, Lyra felt a deep sense of hope. She knew the enemy might return, but she also knew that as long as humans like Ethan existed, there would always be someone willing to stand firm when others ran. And as she looked at the stars above, shining over Xylaris, she understood a truth she would never forget. Sometimes, the bravest heroes come from the most unexpected places. The morning sun rose over the city of Xylaris, casting light on streets still marked by battle but alive with activity. The enemy had retreated, leaving behind broken weapons, abandoned vehicles, and a sense of chaos that was slowly being replaced with hope. Queen Lyra walked through the recovering city, her robes shimmering in the soft light. Citizens greeted her with cautious smiles, their eyes filled with trust and admiration. They had survived because of her leadership and because of one human who refused to abandon her. Ethan followed quietly, observing the city's rebuilding efforts. He had spent the night coordinating teams to clear debris, assist the injured, and secure important areas. His human skills of planning, quick problem-solving, and adaptability made him indispensable. The aliens, though strong and capable, had never faced threats like these before. They were learning. And Ethan was teaching not with words alone, but by example. Lyra stopped at a square where children were cautiously playing, watched over by recovered guards and volunteers. She smiled softly, seeing life return after so much destruction. "We have a long way to go," she said, turning to Ethan. "But today, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time, hope." Ethan nodded. "You have inspired them, Your Highness. Your courage gave them strength. And now, your people can see that even the impossible can be overcome when we work together." The Queen studied him carefully. "You have changed how I see humans. Your people are clever, brave, and loyal in ways I never imagined." Ethan gave a faint smile. "We try. Sometimes the difference between survival and defeat is thinking clearly when others panic." Together, they visited the palace, which had suffered heavy damage. The once grand halls were scarred with fire and debris, but the structure remained standing. Lyra walked through the corridors, recalling the fear she had felt when the guards abandoned her. Now, those same halls were filled with loyal citizens working side by side, restoring what had been lost. "This palace will rise again," she said firmly, "and it will be stronger than before. Not because of its walls or its guards, but because of the people who protect it, and those willing to stand for what is right." Ethan helped her inspect the palace's security systems. Together, they planned upgrades, using a combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. Traps, sensors, and strategic observation points would ensure that no enemy could threaten the Queen again. Lyra marveled at how Ethan combined simplicity with effectiveness, creating solutions that even her most advanced advisors had not thought of. Later, the Queen held a council with her loyal supporters, including the alien resistance leaders and Ethan. Maps of the city and surrounding lands were spread across a table. Lyra addressed the group with authority and vision. "We have faced betrayal, attacks, and overwhelming odds," she said, "but we survived. We fought together, humans and aliens alike. We learned that courage and intelligence can overcome strength and numbers. Today, we rebuild, and together we will ensure that Xylaris remains safe." Ethan added, "Your Highness, the fight is not over, but you have proven that unity and smart action can protect your people. The lessons we learned together will guide every step forward." The council approved plans to strengthen defenses, rebuild infrastructure, and form permanent alliances between humans and loyal aliens. For the first time in Xylaris' history, interspecies cooperation was not just possible, it was essential. In the evening, Lyra and Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Fires from the day's rebuilding glowed softly, and the city seemed alive again, full of possibility. "You stayed when everyone else ran," Lyra said softly. "You risked everything for me. And yet, you never asked for anything in return." Ethan looked at her, his expression calm. "Because it was the right thing to do. Protecting someone, standing when others flee, that is the measure of a person, not the rewards they receive." Lyra nodded, a sense of deep respect filling her heart. "I will make sure your actions are remembered. Humans will not be underestimated again on Xylaris." You have proven that courage, intelligence, and loyalty are qualities that transcend species. Ethan gave a small smile, glancing at the recovering city. It is not just me. Every person willing to stand. Every mind that thinks clearly. Every hand that acts with courage. That is what changes the world. I only happen to be human. The Queen looked at him thoughtfully. She realized that true leadership was not about titles or power. It was about the willingness to act in the face of fear, to inspire others, and to make choices even when the outcome was uncertain. Ethan had shown her that humans were capable of extraordinary things, and she had learned to lead with the same clarity and courage. As night fell, the palace was quiet. The fires of rebuilding glowed softly, casting shadows on walls that had once been scorched by battle. Citizens slept peacefully in their homes, knowing that their queen had survived, and that she had a protector who would stand beside her no matter what. Lyra turned to Ethan. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I will continue to help," he replied. "Not just to protect you, but to ensure that what we built together lasts. Humans may be far from home, but we have a role here, if you allow it." The Queen smiled. "You are always welcome here, Ethan. Your courage and wisdom have earned the trust of my people. And mine." An. Ban. For the first time since the palace attack, Lyra felt a sense of peace. She realized that the trials they had faced had strengthened them, united them, and created a bond that would last beyond this battle. Humans and aliens, working together, had overcome betrayal, chaos, and overwhelming odds. And that bond, built on courage, intelligence, and loyalty, would guide Xylaris into a new era. The night air was cool and filled with stars. Lyra and Ethan stood side by side, looking at the glowing city below. She understood something profound. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it also held endless possibilities. Courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand for what is right could change the course of worlds. And in that moment, she knew that as long as humans like Ethan existed, hope would never fade. Even in the darkest times, there would always be someone willing to stand firm when others ran. The Queen and her human protector turned toward the palace, ready to face the challenges of rebuilding, governing, and protecting Xylaris. The city had survived, the enemy was defeated, and the bond between species had been forged in fire and courage. Together, they would ensure that Xylaris would thrive, and that humans would be remembered as allies who could be trusted when the world seemed to crumble. And so, beneath the stars of an alien sky, Queen Lyra and Ethan, the human who had never abandoned her, stood together, symbols of courage, unity, and hope for the future.